Well, welcome to Umbraco Deploy, a deep dive into migrating between major versions. But before we dive directly in, let's set some expectations first. So we'll start off with a brief introduction about me and about the product Umbraco Deploy and all the features and capabilities. Then we'll go to I'll give you a general overview. Let me rephrase that a little bit. I'll give you a brief introduction into how deploy works, so you get a general understanding. And then we'll start exploring the new export and import feature that also includes being able to do migrations as part of the import. This feature was introduced late last year, so it's been hasn't been around that long. And we'll walk through some of the features during a deep dive. In the first deep dive, we'll see how you can export and import between different major versions. Next, we'll configure migrators to convert certain legacy property editors into the new alternatives. And then finally, I'll also demo some advanced things you can do by writing your own custom migrators as well. Finally, I'll share some resources, so you hopefully will be able to use your new knowledge and the additional resources to try it out yourself. And finally, I'll wrap up and summarize all the things that are demoed as well. Cool. First about me, my name is Ronald Barendse. I'm a senior developer at Umbraco for a little bit over 3 years now. I live and work from the Netherlands, and I'm part of the commercial products team, or the DXP group. In the photo over here, that's last year's pre-party, when we were a total of 6 persons within the DXP group. Nowadays, we're already at 9 persons, spread around the world in 8 different countries. So we're still the most international team within the company. I've been working within the industry for about 15 years. I started at a local web agency, developing a bespoke ASP.NET web forms CMS. We quickly realized with the speed and advances within the industry that wasn't a good choice to continue. So in 2017, I was introduced to Umbraco CMS, and that kind of started my journey, first as a community member and, 3 years ago, at Umbraco itself. Cool. First, I want to have a quick raise of hands who has used Umbraco Deploy. I want to have a right hand for Umbraco Cloud, if you use it on Umbraco Cloud, and a left hand if you use it on-premise. Yeah? You can use both if you use it on Deploy or on cloud and on premises. Yeah, I see some hands. Nice. You can also do this if you don't know Umbraco Cloud Deploy yet. Yeah, I see some. Yeah, well, let's then dive into what Umbraco Deploy actually is. It is the deployment engine for Umbraco by Umbraco. It can do the schema and configuration deployment, but also allows you to do content and media transfers and restores. And of course, it can now also do the export and import, including doing migrations. Then let's jump in and see what different kinds of schema and configuration can be deployed. First up, there's data types. There's also content types like document types, media types, and member types. Then there's also the containers or folders for data types and document types. And media types. There's no support for member type containers, so that's not yet a thing in the CMS itself. You can also transfer dictionary items either as schema or as content if you want your editors be responsible for the actual translations. It can do languages, and it can also do member groups if enabled, or if not disabled, or not configured as content as well. It can do relation types, templates, and webhooks. These are all stored as UDA files on disk, and the UDA files can then be transferred using by copying over the files itself, and most likely you will commit them into a repository, and that then gets built together with your code changes and deployed to your live environments, for example. The UDA files themselves are JSON documents, so they're readable, and I'll touch upon that a little bit later as well. Then regarding the content and media transfers or restores, you can do the actual documents or the content items. You can include public access settings. By default, it will only add or update those settings in the different environments and not remove any of those settings to make sure you don't accidentally push something that removes the public access settings. But you can configure that within the deploy settings if you do want to have that behavior changed. You can also include culture and host names. So by default, it doesn't deploy those culture and host name values. But you can configure whether the culture, the absolute path. So if you have a multi-language site, you can have /en/nl. Both be deployed to between your environments, and you can even configure it to include host names or domains as well. There's also the document blueprints or the content templates that you can deploy, the media and the actual media files, the members if enabled, because by default members can contain personal information, and members can edit their values or their properties themselves. And you probably don't want to have that personal information restored on all the different environments, local developer machines. And you probably also don't want to accidentally deploy your local changes and override any that the members themselves have made. Finally, there's also member groups, and this is something you can disable as well, and use the content transfer, or if configured as content as well, and dictionary items, as I mentioned before, if that's configured as content. Cool. There's also add-ons available for both Umbraco Forms and Umbraco Commerce that allow you to transfer the forms either as schema or as content, depending on the setting, and also your commerce store settings as part of your schema. So local developers can get up and running with both of those products as well. Next up, transfers and restores that can be done between different environments. So it can be between local and multiple online environments. Important is that it requires the schema to be exactly the same. And that's one of the reasons why we recommend doing a left to right deployment approach, where you do your schema changes on the most left environment, like local or development, and then push your changes to the right. The transfer of content is always done to the next environment. So for example, your development environment can transfer content to the staging environment. And if you want to restore content, you can select any of the next or the environments to the right. So development can select whether you want to restore from staging or live. Finally, one thing I want to highlight as well is that this requires a direct HTTPS connection between those environments because it uses a live connection to be able to transfer and restore all that content and media. Cool. Deploy also powers the following features on cloud. We have a create new environment that automatically makes sure that the schema is deployed on your new environment exactly the same way as your other environments. Similarly, you can set up a local environment and make sure your developers have the same schema as well. And it automatically synchronizes the schema changes between environments. So on cloud, if you have changes applied to your development environment, you can use a button in the portal to make sure those changes are deployed to the next environment, to either staging or live. And finally, there's also baselines that are essentially copies of your project, similar to forks, where you can then make changes to your baseline and push those changes to all the copies, the child projects. And also you can restore content from the baseline projects into all those child projects as well. Finally, deploy on premises allows you to integrate it into your own CI/CD build and deployment pipeline. And that allows you to use either a trigger or a marker file, or do a request to a secured endpoint using a provided PowerShell script to trigger a schema deployment and make sure that those changes are applied after the actual code deployment as well. So as I mentioned before, the UDA files are essentially a JSON document that contain both a type and version that's used to write that document. And this type, which I'll elaborate a little bit later on, is used to deserialize into that same type. And the version is used for the import migrators as well. So we can do conditional migrations based on this document version if we have specific versions, specific migrators that we want to apply. The other thing, the JSON document is a representation of the I artifact. And the I artifact has a UDA, that's a unique document, or an Umbraco document identifier. And it contains entity type and a unique part, and that can either be a GUID or a string value identifying both the entity type and the entity itself. It can have dependencies, and it also has a checksum, and a checksum is important for deploy because that's essentially a hash of the actual JSON itself. And that allows deploy to optimize the deployment between environments by using the checksum that's also stored in the database to compare whether things have changed or not without having to generate the artifacts as part of the deployment process again and again. One thing to note as well is because the signatures are stored in the database, if that somehow becomes out of sync with the actual items in your Umbraco installation, that can cause deploy to not pick up on those changes and either skip or cause incorrect schema mismatch warnings to show up. So there's an option in deploy to either clear all those database cached signatures, or since one of the more recent versions, to also regenerate them all. And by making sure that those signatures are already present in both environments that you're transferring between, will make sure that the generation of the actual artifact is not done as part of the deployment. So that should speed up the actual deployment and make sure it's not something your editors have to wait on. Next up, as I mentioned, there are also dependencies, and the dependencies that are added are relate to or identify related items that can exist or need to match exactly. So, for example, you can add parent item and make sure that it exists, because you can't deploy an item with a parent if that parent doesn't exist on the other environment. And for content types, document types, it can require it to be the same. So if you're deploying your content, you know that the exact same properties on that document type also exist in the other environment. As I mentioned, the parent item needs to be deployed not only together with the item that you want to transfer, but also before. So it exists at the time the item is being processed. And that's where the ordering flag is for. So you can make sure that certain items are processed first. Okay, now let's discover how deploy actually does these deployments. And the main workhorse are service connectors. And service connectors can get an artifact by either the UDI or entity. It can process the artifact in an initial or numbered additional passes. And this allows us to, for example, first process your content, and then in the next step, make sure that once all the content is deployed, add the additional public access settings or related information that might need other documents to exist as well. And finally, there's also a method to expand an UDI range into separate UDIs, and that's used by deploy if you want to include all the children or descendants. It also allows you, it compares the artifacts, and that's used to detect the schema comparisons, or the schema, and make sure that there's no mismatches. Then, similar to service connectors, there's also value connectors, and those are used by the content service connectors to actually convert the property data into a serializable format. So numbers will be correctly serialized into a string for representation. And also, in case of legacy editors mostly, it will convert the environment-specific things like the database integer IDs into a generic one that can be deployed between all environments. Then similarly to value connectors, there's the data type configuration connector. And this makes sure that the configuration settings for data type are serialized in the same way as the value connector does it for the property data. Let me go back one more. Important to note is that the service connectors are registered per entity type, and both the value connector and the data type configuration connector are done based on the editor, property editor alias. Now, we have a basic understanding. Let's explore the export and import with migrations feature. Let's start by explaining why we added this feature, because we had multiple goals we wanted to achieve. We noticed that large content transfers sometimes timed out because of the request limits that are enforced by certain platforms, like on Azure web apps. In that case, in that specific case, it's a 4-minute timeout. So if certain actions in the deploy process took more than 4 minutes, it would just fail the whole deployment, and you'll get a nice warning, but not so nice experience. So we wanted to do something about that. First, we tried adding batching support. So if you want to transfer items from one environment to the next, you add items to a queue for deployment. And if you use the batching settings, it will pick items, the amount of items in your batching source batching settings, and select those items for transfer. But that would still include all the dependent items. So it sometimes could still result in large deployments and then timeouts. So we introduced a second batching setting that's based on the deploy packages. So deploy figures out what it needs to deploy between those environments and then creates a package, sends it over for processing. And by using the batch or the package setting, it will then cut that package in multiple chunks. But because that processing is done in multiple chunks as well, it can be that in the initial process, it doesn't have all the items because that's in a chunk that still needs to be processed. So to overcome that limitation, all the items will be processed twice. So the initial pass will make sure everything exists, and the second pass will make sure that all the references are updated, because it by then has all the items on the environment available to deploy. We also wanted to make some improvements to upgrading, specifically because it's quite a complex process to migrate between major versions. With our current documentation, especially regarding Umbraco Cloud, the recommended approach is to migrate between major versions and one major at a time. But with the 6-monthly major release schedule, that can mean that you want to jump once a year or once every 2 years from LTS to LTS. So that can become quite complex. Also, it can require some manual changes to be done to the website. And if you want to repeat that process, manual changes need to be repeated as well. So it can be a waste of time. Finally, there were also some issues with large databases where the actual database migration in the CMS would time out or throw exceptions half an hour, hours into the actual migration, which would then roll back the transaction and undo any things that's already done, meaning that you needed to fix the error and then try again, which is also not the best experience. So we also wanted to make new things possible, like providing an alternative deployment method that doesn't require a connection between those environments. This could also make sure that the platform-specific timeouts aren't an issue anymore. And by not only making the upgrade process easier, we also wanted to make it faster as well. Besides just jumping a single major version, also just making sure you don't have to wait for all those database migrations to hopefully successfully complete as well. Also, a big benefit of using the import-export is that you don't have to use content freezes or not as long content freezes for your editors, because you can do an export, start your upgrade process, do all the development work required to make sure that export can be imported into your new version. And then once you're happy and ready to do the final migration, you could do an additional export and then have the latest content in your new version without having a content freeze for your editors. We also wanted to make it possible to migrate legacy property editors to their newer alternatives. And that's currently not something that's done by the CMS itself as part of the upgrade process. We also want to expose a service that users can, or developers can use, which allows you to do manual imports and exports, which can be used for database snapshots or backup snapshots, and also to deploy between isolated environments, because there's no need to have that direct connection between them. So, to which versions was this added? We actually added it to multiple major versions at the same time. So deploy 4.9, 10.3, 12.1, and 13 plus have this feature included. So that means version 14 also has this feature. After the introduction, we released a deploy contrib export package. And this allows exporting Umbraco 7 packages. And it doesn't even require a license. So if you have a legacy project that you still want to migrate to a newer version, you can install deploy, install the deploy contrib and the export package, create an export, and then use that file to import into a newer version, which does require a license. But that's included on the Umbraco Cloud plans, and can otherwise be used with the deploy on-premise if you have a license. Yep. And then also to make sure that you are able to import that Umbraco 7 export, we added legacy migrators, import migrators, in the deploy contrib package. So that's the open sourced package that we have on GitHub. And for that you do require the version 4.3, 10.2, 12.1 or 13.1 of that contrib package, and also updated miners of deploy itself. So make sure to update first. Cool, I've been talking a lot about what features are available and what it all can do, but how do you use it? Well, you can export from the back office, and that will generate a zip archive that you can then download and upload again into the other environment for import. When creating the export, you can optionally select whether you want to include related content, like picked content or media. You can select whether you want to include schema as part of that export, so that includes the document types, data type, languages, etc. You can also select whether you want to include files, so that's the media files. And one note regarding checking that box is that if you have a large media collection or just large files in your media collection, that can result in very large zip archive. And there are regular upload limits if you are trying to import that into a new environment. So an alternative to including that into your export is to do a manual copy, and that can either be just via an FTP or an Azure Blob Storage copy, because it's essentially separate files that just needs to be available on the new environment. Finally, you can also select the schema files, so that it can be the templates or the views or the partial views, the scripts and style sheets in your installation. From code, we also have the iArtifact import export service that allows you to do imports and exports from a physical directory, from an iFile system implementation, and that's something we already have ready-to-use implementations for Azure Blob Storage, a zip archive as used by the back office, and also by writing your own custom iArtifact import or export provider in case you have your own storage that you want to use for this. Finally, the migrators that can run during the import process are registered via code, which I'll make sure to demo after this. So let's do our first deep dive and see how we can export and import content between Umbraco 10 and 13. Yes. So I'll show you the Umbraco 10 environment first. Let's make sure both are running. And try again. Yes. So just to show, this is running Umbraco 10.8, and I can right-click the content node and do a workspace export. And a workspace export includes all the deployable content and files in the current environment. I'm just going to include everything, create the export. It will now generate all the artifacts, put those in the zip archive, include all the files, the content files, so the media files. I'll download, and all these, this zip archive is stored in the Umbraco temp directory, so that can either be in your Umbraco data temp folder, or if you use the environment temp setting in your local environment on the server. You can, once downloaded, also make sure that's cleaned up. There is a way to also clean up any leftover files using the deploy dashboard under settings. So I'll quickly show what we actually exported. This is just the starter kit, and it contains the whole workspace. So I'll go to the Umbraco 13 environment, log in as well, and then just show you that there's no document types, only the built-in data types are available over here. And then if I go to import, select the zip file from my downloads, I can then select whether I want to include everything that's in the export, or for example, if you want to first do an import of only the schema, or and then check whether that's all correct, and then do the content import. That's all possible. For now, I'll just import, and you'll notice we get an exception, and this is because the new environment doesn't have a property editor, so you need to dig a little bit deeper and check the actual message, and you'll see it's probably too small to actually read, but it's mentioning it can't find an editor with the alias Berg Media OpenStreetMap. So let's go into the Umbraco 13 website and make sure to install that package, which also makes sure that the property editor is available. And then restart the site. And just try the import again. So I have to upload the file, import, and then wait a little bit. Import complete. And you can see it now has the content of the starter kit, but it's showing a message that some files could not be found. As I mentioned, the related items that are included in the export, but some things that specifically in code are not related to the actual content. So there needs to be some code that you can copy over once. So I have a, let me go over here, a script that just copies over those files. This only needs to be done once. Of course, if you're doing changes to those files in your original environment, still need to make sure those changes are copied over. But in most cases, you probably use a version control like Git, and you're able to use take advantage of that. But once those files are in, I'll see if we also, and we also have the whole Umbraco 10 starter kit now imported into Umbraco 13 with all pages working the same. So there's no real code involved except just making sure that we copy over some views from the original to the updated project. Cool. Then back to this. Yep. So yeah, there's no custom migrators needed for this type of export-import. You just need to make sure that you fix some of the compilation errors or make some adjustments to your views if necessary. And that's especially the case if you're migrating from an Umbraco 8 to 13, for example, because that does change a lot of things on the front-end part of the Umbraco. Next, I want to also highlight the ways of migrating during that import, and give a basic understanding of how that migration works. So there are two types of migrations. The first one is an artifact migrator, and an artifact migrator can essentially do changes based on the deserialized DI artifact in deploy before it's being processed by the service connector. And that allows you to do things like replace the property editor alias of data types. And it allows you to, for example, rename things, change settings like enabling a vary by culture on document types or properties, change other settings as well. And then there's property type migrators, and it's similar to the service connector and the value connector that I talked about before. The property type migrators allow you to migrate the property type values, so the property data, based on a changed property editor alias. So it detects whether something in your environment you're importing into has a different property editor, and that can be because you changed it in the artifact itself, and will then make sure that, for example, if you have nested content migrated into the block list, that not only the actual data type is migrated, but also all the content from in your website is migrated into the new block list structure. There are different types of migrators, artifact migrators available. So the base interface is the artifact migrator, and we have one that allows you to specify the type of artifact that you want to migrate, and optionally also set a minimum and maximum version that migrator has to run on. And that version is based on the type that I showed in the artifact JSON before. Then there's also two base classes, additional base classes, one for just the data type artifact, and that allows you to specify the property editor of a data type that you want to migrate, and also a replace data type artifact migrator that allows you to specify both the editor alias that you want to migrate from and the one that you want to move into. So to make it easy for the built-in property editors in Umbraco, we've already made implementations for replacing the legacy media picker into the new media picker with crops. We also have the nested content data type migrator that migrates your data types into a block list. And if you don't have an alternative for a property editor in a new version, you can also have like a catch-all type of migrator that will make sure that any unknown property editors are replaced with a label. We are developing a migrator for the legacy grid layout and moving that into the block list or the block grid as well. But because the structure is quite complicated and different between those editors, still has some challenges, but I'll leave that for a little bit later today. Then the artifact migrators also have an option to do a more low-level migration using the iArtifact JSON migrator. And there's a similar base class that specifies the artifact type. This is mainly used for the Umbraco 7 import, for the legacy migrators that we've developed in the deploy concept package, because the JSON structure has changed significantly between 7 and 8 and newer versions. So this type of migrator allows us to change properties in the JSON before it's being deserialized. So we have all the data that we need in the actual new artifact type. Then up next, the property type migrators that allows you to, or that's handled by the actual content connectors, service connectors for documents, media, and members. That's triggered when a change in the property editor alias is detected. And we have the iProperty type migrator, a base class, and then built-in implementations for the media picker and nested content as well. So we have ready-to-use migrations currently for both changing the data types and the content of nested content into block list, and the media picker into the newer one with crops. So let's show how we can then, this one, add some additional migrators to the Umbraco 13 import. So I have a composer that's currently still disabled. I'll make sure it's enabled again. You can see it adds the nested content and media picker data type artifact migrators, and the same for the property type migrators. But this is essentially all the code you need to make sure that the nested content is migrated as part of the import. So let's quickly show an example where it's currently still using the nested content. And because we now enabled those migrators, we can do an additional import, select the same zip archive, import again, and now it will apply those migrations. And if we refresh this page, you will see it now has the newer block list that has the additional features associated with it. Just to make it absolutely clear, if we go to the product features, you can see it's using the block list. it doesn't by default rename the actual data type, but you can of course add your own custom migrators to also make sure that the name, in this case the product features nested content, is updated to something that reflects that it's actually a block list now. So that should give you an impression of how easy this type of migration can be. And then we'll also, I also want to highlight how to write a custom migrator. This is most likely the case if you use custom packages that don't exist anymore in the new version, or if you want to migrate to a newer version or a different editor. One example is the Matryoshka group separator package that was created by Soren Kottal that added tabs back into Umbraco 8. Before it was natively reintroduced in Umbraco's 8.17, which is one of the first big features I was able to work on after joining Umbraco. But it's also nice to see that there's a nice way to migrate from Umbraco 8 into 13, even if it uses a package like this. So I'll go to the next demo. So I have an Umbraco 8 project, which I'll quickly show. Should be this one. And of course, Umbraco 8's a little bit slower in starting up. We're all used to the improved speeds of the latest versions. But yeah, so I'm still using the default starter kit, but in Umbraco 8 I've installed the Matryoshka package and customized the home document type to have tabs for content and design, and then groups for hero, content, and footer. I'll also show you the document type itself. So currently it shows in the document type or the document type editor as being a group, with then a property for the Matryoshka group separator for hero, content, and footer. But if we export this, do a workspace export, include everything, make sure to download, and clean up again. If I wanted to import this into Umbraco 13, where the Matryoshka package is not available, then I can either choose to remove all the properties, and that can be done on the Umbraco 8 project, but then your editors will have a less than ideal experience just in that in-between period before going to a new version. And of course, you also need to re-implement and restructure your document type on the new version as well. So instead, you can write custom migrators, which can be added in the same way as I showed you before. In this case, I've created a data type artifact migrator based on the editor alias of the Matryoshka group separator, made sure that it only executes when it's importing something from an Umbraco 8 website. So the max version is set to version 9, because it wasn't available in anything else than version 8. And it's migrating to null. So if the data type is imported, it currently returns null, and therefore will skip processing that data type. But because that data type is then not available when deploying the data document type, we also need to make sure that all the properties on that document type are removed. But just removing the properties will then also lose all the tabs and groups that you've configured using Matryoshka. So in this code, it just goes over all the property groups make sure that instead of using the default group type, it converts all the imported groups that were groups in 8 as tabs in Umbraco 13. And then, depending on whether it finds a data type that does not exist, which should be the Matryoshka editor, it will then create a new group, make sure that the alias is properly formatted to be below the tab that it's currently processing, make sure that sort order and all the property types are added below that as well. And finally, the content itself also still has the properties for Matryoshka, so we can do a similar thing and make sure that that all document artifacts, media artifacts, and member artifacts that contain the properties are processed, and if it can't find, or if it finds the property editor alias of Matryoshka, it will make sure that's removed. So we should end up with a nice and clean Umbraco 13 website that still has the structure from Umbraco 8. So this is an empty Umbraco 13. And we go to import. Select the file I just exported in Umbraco 8. I see there are still some exceptions that are caused by the CMS and the way it processes and tries to update the different caches or examine indexes. So we have a fairly elaborate explanation about why you currently sometimes can get those exceptions and how you can handle these situations. The thing to note here is that the actual deployment and import was completed. It's just that after deployment, all the notifications are published, and if one of those notifications runs into an exception, that will still result in showing that exception to the user. So hopefully in newer CMS versions, we're able to pinpoint the actual issue and we'll be able to resolve this. But the explanation and all the steps are already in this message and also documented in the Umbraco Deploy documentation. So I do now have to manually refresh, but I can show that it did actually import the whole website, and it made sure that the same tabs and groups are available in this new version. So that's a more elaborate example of what you can do with the custom migrators and the extensibility that this new feature has. Let me see if I... Yep. Right. I'll share some resources. Before I have some minutes left to do a final demo. Yeah. As I mentioned before, the documentation of this new feature and all the different ways to extend and write your own migrators is available on docs.umbraco.com, and you can then select Umbraco Deploy, and then there's a separate section for the import-export feature. The deploy contrib is available as open source, and we have a special release if you want to use the export on Umbraco 7. There's also some PRs that are linked in that release note that show how you can configure that export for Umbraco 7. And of course, if you run into some issues or bugs, then there's also the deploy issue tracker. And in case you have further questions, we have our awesome colleagues at SWAT that are available to ask questions and get help. or if you want to know more about the possibilities of using either deploy on cloud or on premises, you can contact sales. Then, yeah, still 5 minutes. I have a special demo prepared showing how you can export Umbraco 7 using the deploy contrib export package, using some additional code that's all documented that will make sure that once the website is started in Umbraco 7, it will gather all the things that we want to export and then do an export into the data directory of that Umbraco 7 project. So if we first start that up, then we'll quickly show the data folder. So as part of the startup, it will generate that zip file. There you go. And just to also quickly highlight that it's a zip file containing all those UDA files and also the template and media files. You can open this up. You can look into the actual JSON, which might be useful if you're trying to migrate a custom property editor or other data. And then instead of importing into Umbraco 13, we recently released Umbraco 14. There's still some changes required because of the changes in 14 regarding the data types that now require an editor UI alias. And there are also some editors that are not available in 14 anymore, like nested content and the legacy media picker. So those both will need to be migrated as part of the import process. Luckily, as I mentioned, it's a little bit tricky, but not undoable. So I've currently set up a fairly extensive composer that adds all the things needed to be able to import both 7 and migrate into a format that's available, that's required for Umbraco 14. So that requires making sure that the data types or element types in nested content are actually marked as element types, something that wasn't available in Umbraco 7. It also removes, in this case, or replaces the tera type that's used on the contact page and the starter kit with a label. There's some additional cleanup things to remove null properties. And then we're replacing media pickers and nested content to their new alternatives. But also, this is the initial version for a grid layout migrator that converts all your existing grid items into the block grid. And then any unknown editors will be replaced to a label. And in this case, the Umbraco 7 starter kit still uses the Umbraco Forms picker, but I haven't installed Forms on this project yet. And we make sure that the editor UI alias is set. And the same for the media picker, nested content, and grid. The property values are migrated as part of the import as well. So we'll now go into Umbraco 14. Then use the import. And then go to the Umbraco 7 project data export. And now I need some demo gods that are happy with me. Let's see if we can import this from 7 all the way up to 14. It says it's complete. Yeah, I can get some applause. Yeah, cool. So the starter kit is now imported. It has all the content over here. The content, which was previously in a grid layout, is now part of the block grid as well. And I can quickly show on this page that there are still some issues with converting the nested content into block list if you also enable the inline editing mode. But that's all things that we'll definitely work on in the coming weeks, months, and make sure that that's also behaving exactly as you would expect. Yeah, and with that, I'll quickly summarize. I hope this has given you an understanding of how Umbraco Deploy works, why the export and import with migrations feature was added, how you can configure the migrators, and how you can write custom ones, and of course, have a nice supported way of migrating to the latest CMS versions. So with that, thank you very much.